Welcome to the Know Your Ship podcast, presented by eHub. I'm your host, Frank Dolce. Welcome back. Man, this is a guy that I've known for a long time. I used to work for him, in fact.
That's right.
At one point in time before he fired me. No. that's not exactly true. But we worked in the same building where you're located currently at the stadium at now the America First
Field.
Yeah. This is the one and only John Kimball, the one and only president of RSL.
Head janitor.
That's not true. And if you know the history of RSL, the recent history of RSL, we know that early in the history, RSL won the championship and then went through some, good years. Felt like it kind of dwindled a little bit, struggled a little bit. Mm-hmm. You came in around 2020?
It's 3 years ago in September.
So 2021.
Yeah.
You come along as the interim, and at one point you're working without an ownership group.
Correct.
It's kind of in between, and you've gone through this incredible run of building back the prominence of RSL. That's got to be enormously satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, and I give all of the credit to just really good people that we've brought back, and people that have been there for a long time, and just a group of people that had a passion for something that we knew we were capable of because we've won a national championship, and then just process, accountability, doing the work. And now it's, you can see that the team is really gelling, and that's been a lot of work, but they're doing a great job.
Well, for a lot of us who know you, we feel like this position you're in now has been a long time coming.
Yeah, I don't feel that way.
You don't?
No, I mean, I feel like I just have so much more to learn, and I feel like I'm a benefactor of having really good people around me, and with that, I've just always believed if you have good people that have a common goal, you can really accomplish just about anything you want, and we had that back in 2009 and before when we won the championship. We had an amazing group of people. And it's funny because over the years, I've had a number of those people come back and say that was the highlight of my career. That was the best culture I'd ever been involved in. I'd love to figure out a way to get back to the team. And some of those people we've brought back, and I think we're well on our way to create that same culture again. But again, it's just having really, really solid people on the team.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to talk about that culture as we go along in this podcast, but I really want to figure out your path, how you got to this point. You've been prominent in this market for a long time, and you've worked with several of the local media companies. You've worked with the Jazz, you've worked with RSL, and like I said, it feels like you've landed in the position that you should have landed in a long time ago with all of your experience. But let's dial this all the way back.
Okay.
And let's talk about the young John Kimball growing up in Salt Lake City.
Born and raised just above 2nd Avenue, over by the University of Utah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Elementary school, high school, in the state.
Yep. Wasatch Elementary, East High School, a number of different colleges, but I was lucky enough to do 5 study abroads in college, so I was just going around seeing the world.
Wait, why did you do that? How did you do 5 study abroads?
I don't know. I just got a bug. My dad was a travel agent as a kid, and so I'd seen a lot of the world before I was in college, and I just thought, it's one thing to just go to school where you live. It's another thing to go experience the world. And so I through, I don't know, just a lot of luck and people supporting me, was able to go see a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, interesting. Well, the Kimball name is significant in Salt Lake, in the Salt Lake Valley for sure. Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about your parents and siblings.
Amazing parents. My dad is, my biggest mentor and just an amazing human being who was taken early. Unfortunately, he passed away at 69 from a brain tumor. But my mom has just been a warrior. She's going to outlive all of us. I have an older brother and a younger sister. My brother, Ted, is a doctor at the University of Utah Hospital, and my sister is also a doctor. She's a neonatologist down in San Diego.
You didn't get the MD bug?
I'm the one that goes to the hospital. They're the ones that work at the hospital. So,
what were kind of you mentioned your dad as kind of a hero, and as you look back on that growing up, what were some of the lessons that you learned from your dad that you lean on, or learned from your family that you lean on today?
Yeah, my dad was just he was bigger than life. He was just one of those guys that everybody loved. And to this day, I luckily think I look a little bit like him. So people will walk up and say, are you Jim Kimball's son? And he just had a lot of impact on a lot of people's lives. And he was just one of those guys that always made you laugh. For years, he did a traveling show on Jay Golden Kimball, and you can still see it on PBS. They use it as a fundraiser every year. Mm-hmm. And he just had an amazing sense of humor, and was just, somebody that people loved having in their lives. And so to see that and to see, just what a positive force he was, he was just everything to me as a kid growing up, and everything I wanted to be and everything I wanted to make proud. I wanted him to be proud of me, and he was that guy. He traveled a ton as a travel agent, but would try to make every game that I played. Even when we were playing flag football in college, he'd come out and would be the one fan out there cheering us all on. But just a remarkable human being.
Yeah,
and my mom was just the traditional mom, just amazing. Fed us, drive us everywhere, just a constant presence. And she's 92 now and still trucking. But I just had one of those childhoods that was just ridiculous. And I just feel really lucky and blessed because I grew up in an amazing neighborhood with a great family, with great mentors in my neighborhood. I mean, men that I looked up to, women that were powerful. My sister, like I said, has grown up to be a doctor. She had amazing mentors. And so it was kind of surreal, the neighborhood and family and kind of circumstances I grew up in.
Who was the disciplinarian in your house?
Definitely my mom. Yeah.
So if you got in trouble, were you going to talk to Dad first?
Because I had an older brother, I never got caught. So I never really got in trouble because I learned very quickly how to avoid getting caught. But yeah, and just say, what were you thinking? And then would laugh about it as opposed to anything else. My mom was definitely the one that would, scold and be mad if something happened. So,
well, it seems like knowing you for as long as I've known you and working with you, would you say that trait of your dad's to talk and reason is something that applies to you as well? I feel like that's part of your personality.
Yeah, I mean, I wished. I mean, I really, if I, am even a shadow or in the shadow of my dad, I would feel very honored. He was a great speaker. He wrote a number of books. He wrote for the Tribune travel section every single week, and just was amazing. And I've never been a fan of public speaking. I've never really felt confident. But, I feel like I've been able to tap into him, and be able to, I guess communicate, but it's not something. He was confident, he loved being on stage and in front of people and telling stories. And I'm much more of an introvert than he was, definitely much more of an extrovert. So,
yeah, that's interesting. You have an athletic background as well. I know that, well, you mentioned, your
I tell you,
flag football
flag
prowess.
football, that's right. Yeah.
Well,
nothing like you though, Frank.
Well, I mean, that's a high bar. Let's be honest.
It is a high bar.
But I know that you were part of a national championship Highland rugby team, and they even made a movie about that team. Was that your team that they made the movie about?
Yeah, I mean, it was a number of different stories that they compiled to make a movie.
Gotcha.
But my team is actually in the film when they zoom in at the hospital, and I'm the guy standing next to the actor that they imposed into the picture on crutches. And so that was my team, and we were the first national champions of the kind of high school, or the Highland High School reign. I think Coach Gelwicks won 419 games and lost 10, and won 20 national championships over, I think, 26 years. He's got to be the most winning coach.
He has to be.
Yeah.
The most decorated coach.
Yeah. And he, true to the movie, he just was an exceptional human being. He and my dad were close friends because he was in the travel
I know.
industry.
That's what I was going to say. He was a travel agent as well, or something like that.
He
Put together
still
tours.
is. Yeah, he works for Columbus Travel.
Nice.
And he and my dad were good friends. And I always thought that's why Larry kind of watched out for me and would communicate and talk to me. But he, we all kind of ended up finding out he was doing that with every player and connecting with every player. And no, he was definitely had a massive impact on me as a, young idiot.
Weren't we all?
Yeah.
At some point. Tell me about the lessons that you learned on the athletic field. And maybe we can talk about that a little bit, because I feel it's significant in my life.
Yeah.
The things that happen in that arena, I don't know if where else you get that, but how significant was that for you and how you evolved?
No, I mean, being in sports and, and raising my kids in sports and coaching, and, those are very formative years. And if you have somebody who steps up and is willing to be a mentor and a leader, you can't help but pay attention. And especially if they give you a formula that allows you to win and be successful. And Coach Gelwicks he had an amazing formula of just being a really down-to-earth human being, but demanding excellence, demanding commitment. The one thing that I think we're really lacking today with youth is accountability and consequences.
Oh, yes.
I mean, Coach would say, if you drink, if you do drugs, if you do anything to embarrass yourself, your family, or the team, you'll get kicked off the team. And it was zero tolerance. And there were kids. I remember going to San Francisco and playing in a tournament down there, and a kid went out, got drunk, and he sent him home. Starting player, one of our best players, verified that it happened, and then said, "You're getting on a plane, you're gone." And it just sent a message that, to all of us that, hey, if we want to be on this team, this is the commitment. And then when we just started destroying other teams, I mean, we were playing the colleges. We would play the second teams of BYU, U of U, Utah State, Weber State. We were undefeated because we were so conditioned. And he would, ask us on our honor to run an extra mile or two a week. And you had to do that on your own time. And he just expected you to do it. And we would just run over teams because you're playing colleges that are, except for BYU, however, I won't say that. But other than, well, I won't even say that.
Are you sure you don't want to say it?
Yeah. We're kind of, BYU is an amazing team now. They're nationally recognized. And back then it was more of a club sport. But again, we're playing guys that are in their 20s and we're high school and we were just crushing them.
Yeah.
And we couldn't, there weren't any other high schools in the state of Utah. So we had to travel to play other teams. So we'd go to Colorado and California. And Larry would always figure out all these unique ways for us to raise money to travel. But, I came from East High School, which I think was recognized in Sports Illustrated as one of the most losing high school football programs over a period of time.
Yeah. I don't think they won a football game for 3 years.
Yeah, I think I was not a win. And, but, I knew we had athletes. We knew how to, we knew how to play sports. And that national team, I think the majority of the team came from East High School.
Oh,
or from other schools.
Yeah.
And it was back then when, the aggregate was, we were coming from West and from Highland and from East and Skyline. And we came from all over the valley to create the team that we had. But like I said, and Coach Gelwicks, I've really thought just recently, because he's getting inducted to the Rugby Hall of Fame, and the Warriors having a big event this Friday. They got a big game coming up, and they just opened a new facility. They train and play at our facility out in Harriman, and they recognized Coach Gelwicks. And, it's some of the things that he would say to us are now ring in my head. Like he would say, it doesn't matter who scores as long as we score. And he also, this was something that I brought up with Jason Kreis, a guy that we just brought back to Real. And
so for people, let me just stop you there. Don't forget your story, but just give us a little background on Jason Kreis so people know.
So Jason Kreis was the first player we signed with Real Salt Lake, I think in 2005. He was our captain. I think it was within a year or two, he became mid-season our head coach for Real Salt Lake with no coaching experience. And then within 4 years, won a national championship. Yeah. And he went on to, work for other teams. I believe he went to New York. He went I think he actually went overseas. I can't remember which team he was associated with overseas, but Orlando and a couple of other teams. And he was one of those employees that had said, wow, the culture that we had, the team, we were one of the worst teams to get into the playoffs. We came in the Eastern Division wild card and then ran the table and won the national championship against David Beckham's Galaxy, which I thought it was really ironic that they left that segment out of the Netflix Beckham story.
Yeah. Isn't that
so Jason's back.
Kreis,
we brought him back in January. He didn't want to coach. He wanted to. I was saying that he was one of the employees that said that culture that we had was magical, and he was a big part of it. He had a mantra that the team is the star, and he brought together this group of guys that had no business beating David Beckham's team.
Yeah.
We stepped up, and I think I was pointing out that they didn't mention that in the Beckham story.
Beckham story, which was a great documentary.
Yeah. And I've got another Beckham story. So if you want me to tell that, I'll tell that too.
Oh, wait, is this a recent Beckham story?
No, but this should have been part of the film, because I for the most part, would not walk across the street to get an autograph from anyone. I mean, maybe Kelly Slater is like the only person that I would cross the street
Really?
to meet.
The surfer.
The gene, I didn't get that gene of really caring about that. And
I won't tell him when I signed that stuff for you.
That's right. Except for you, of course. But when Dave Checkett's, long story, Real Salt Lake came from a partnership or a relationship with Real Madrid.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an agreement that Real Madrid would come and play here in Salt Lake. So they came. It was amazing. They showed up. My wife at the time was telling me what an amazing person David Beckham was and how sexy and attractive and what an amazing, and I was just like, whatever. I mean, I'm just like, this guy, and you look at him and you're like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. But
whatever.
Again, I was not impressed. I was like, whatever. And I, didn't know much about him, didn't really know his history other than these guys are one of the best teams in the world.
Mm.
And again, for me, I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever, good for you. But they show up, they got a private jet, they all got matching suits, they're just buttoned up. They looked amazing. Showed up. I remember the first thing we asked is we wanted him to do an autograph session. And he said, I won't do that without my co-captains, which I thought, that's pretty cool.
Okay.
Because,
Yeah.
He's big name, everybody wants his autograph.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he went through that whole autograph session. And then later in the day, we had a Make-A-Wish kid that we had lined up to have David meet. And I remember his publicist came walking down the tunnel, and I was standing next to the kid up at Rice Eccles at the mouth of the tunnel. And his publicist walked up into me, and she said, now, John, David has 3 minutes with this kid. 3 minutes. And I'm sitting there just like, really? Really? And then David walked out and he grabbed this kid's hand and he turned around to his publicist and he said, I will tell you when I'm done. And he took this kid out on the middle of Rice Eccles Field and played for, 20, 30, 40 minutes with this kid. And I was just like, okay, that guy, that's an amazing person. He truly, to that series or that film, he's a unique human being.
Man, I didn't like David Beckham.
Yeah.
And then I
either.
saw the documentary, and then I was like, wait, I like David Beckham.
Yeah.
And now I even like him more.
I know he's, I've been around a lot of professional athletes, and he's one of those guys.
That's a great story.
It's unbelievable.
It's such a great story.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that you talked about. I'm hoping I can hit all of them. One of them is your coach Gelwicks and Greg Popovich. So there's a great book called The Culture Code.
Yeah.
And in that book, they talk about the San Antonio Spurs and they talk about Greg Popovich. And part of his greatness is his ability to connect with every one of his players, not just the star players, not just Tim Duncan,
individually,
but individually with his players and the way he manages that team. And I just thought that was really interesting, the way you talked about Coach Gelwicks and you thought that maybe you were his guy.
Yeah, he knows everybody. My dad's asking him to watch out for me.
Yeah.
And, come to kind of, and really it was after I saw the film, I was like, wow, he actually was, and he would, during practice, he'd pull you off the field and he'd say, hey, pull up a chair, sit next to me. And you'd see somebody sitting and he's just talking and you're like, you don't know what they're talking about. But he was good. And he always would say things like he wasn't building a rugby team, he was building men. And he wanted to teach men, morals and ethics and discipline. And through that education, he taught us how to come together and just truck people. I mean, I'll never forget, we were playing a team in California. We were up 65-0.
You better call off the dogs.
Story that I was telling Jason, because one of the things I hate about soccer is when a team will get up and then they'll sit
park
back.
the bus.
And then, the opposing team comes down, takes 15 shots on goal. The goalie's bouncing out, and they play this ridiculous defensive model. And I said to Jason, I said, this is the most ridiculous thing. I said, I get it. I'm not an expert in this sport, and knowing how to coach it. But that makes no sense to me. I said, when I played rugby, we were up 65-0, and I was the captain of the team. And I walked up to Larry and I said, Larry, should we substitute some players? And he said, no. He said, I want them to remember you. I want them to always remember playing Highland High School. And we beat them, I think it was 85-0. We just stomped them. And I thought, well, that might have been a little excessive, but, and I think, there might have been a backstory to the fact that we couldn't get accredited as a high school, that other teams didn't think we would, be able to play at their level. And when we made it to the national championships and qualified, we had to play, I think it was 4 games in 2 days. And, they seeded us last because we didn't have a lot of accreditation, and we just destroyed everybody. And the last game we played was a team from San Francisco that was all Polynesian. And for the most part, everybody left the field. And that team, I'm trying to remember their name, but they were crushing teams. And they were like, you guys are just going to get worked. And we went in and we pounded them. And so that was kind of the start of, I think, what ended up being 20 national championships. Wow. So, and it was just amazing. And like I said, when I think back to some of the things that Larry taught, and I think it's where kind of some of my business philosophy comes from, that, it wasn't any one of us that was a superstar. It was when we came together. I was part of the scrum. I was on the outside of the scrum. And we had a kind of a chant where we would come together, then we would squeeze, meaning we'd pull together tight, and then we would drop, and then we would push. And when we followed that cadence, again, we would roll right over the top of other teams because we came together as a single force and just dominated. And it was that kind of philosophy, I think, of, there's no one person that's the star. It's like Jason Kreis, would teach the team is the star. Yeah. And I think, in our organization, we just have really talented people, and best idea wins. And when we come together and, think and align ourselves and have a common goal, we can roll over things.
Not the individual scores, we score.
Correct.
Like that kind of philosophy. And that
it's not
comes,
who scores, it's that we score.
It's we score. And that's from Coach Gelwick's as well. As I'm looking back across now, learning all of this experience, it seems like where you are now and the lessons that you can apply are very clear on the culture side. I want to go back one more thing, because it sounds like you had kind of this idyllic childhood, surrounded by really good people and a great family and lots of opportunity, and you took advantage of all of that, certainly. Where's the controversy? Yeah. Where is the obstacle in your life up to this point? Or are you just kind of like, you're on cruise control?
I like I said, I feel blessed, but I think, the controversy for me as a kid was learning disability. I had a learning disability. I was not the kid that, could sit in class. Not only do I know I suffered from concussions, but had ADD, dyslexia, just a number of different things that, I was in resource. I was the resource kid. All my friends were like, where do you go? Like during the middle of the day. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I go to this like special class and they use these Rubik's cubes and I don't know what I'm doing, but it's pretty cool. They have treats in there and all my friends are jealous. And then, I come to find out, I've got a learning disability. I've got these challenges. So for me, I think those were some of the things that really drove me to try to excel in sports and to try to, physically kind of overcompensate for things. And I just accepted it. And the irony of it all is that I accepted that I had a learning disability. And I went through high school. I was a mastermind at cheating. I'll never forget, and you probably know this head coach at East High School was some Australian guy that was famous for doing something. But he was teaching our class And I had this cheat sheet in between my sheets, and it was one-on-one. He was sitting there because he knew I cheated, but he was trying to figure out how to catch me, and he couldn't. And he came over and he pulled my sheet up, and my paper fell to the floor, and I stepped on it. And he's like looking through it, and he's like, "I don't know how you're doing this, but I know you're cheating." I'm like,
gosh.
"What?" And so, again, that's how I got through high school, because I was convinced that I had this learning disability. It was the only way for me to survive, and they weren't helping me. They weren't helping me try to figure it out. So I went through high school believing that, and then I ended up going on an LDS mission.
Mm-hmm.
And, part of the program was, you got to study these scriptures. So, long story short, somebody as a kid challenged me. Again, I was at church, and this woman who was really smart said, "I bet that you can't read a scripture every single day." And I said, I know I can. And so I did from like age 9 every single night. So my parents would walk in and go, "Oh, look at this angel. He's reading the scriptures." And I was literally proving this woman wrong.
Right.
And I would open the book and go, and close the book. And I did it for years, but then started reading verse and chapters and all that kind of stuff. And, by the time I left on my mission, I'd read all the books multiple times, didn't know anything, wasn't paying attention, but I created a habit of learning. And through my mission, by the end of it, you could, for the most part, open the book and say, "What verse is this?" And I'd say, "Well, it's this." And so I come home with this discipline, and I go to college and I apply it, and I end up graduating with a 3.8 and honors. And I was just like, I never had a learning disability. Somebody convinced me that I did. And I just accepted that I did. I just had to learn differently. I learned that I had to read something, I had to highlight it, I had to then take out what I highlighted and write it on a piece of paper, and then I had to study those papers. And if I did that, I would get A's in my classes.
And you were able to figure that out.
Yeah. So luckily I kind of figured that out. And I still, I still feel like I have just a different style of learning, which I think a lot of kids deal with. And it's just a matter of trying to figure out how somebody learns.
Well, thank goodness that you figured it out. I mean, sometimes, and this is one of the things I have a difficult time with, is like people get labeled.
Yeah.
And then they just believe the label.
Oh, yeah.
And then that becomes the challenge.
Yeah.
And sometimes they can't overcome it. And you were able to overcome that obstacle.
I just got lucky because I just started reading something, and I wanted to know what I was talking about. I remember saying at my farewell, I said, "If I find out that I'm wasting my time, I'm going to come home."
You said that at your farewell?
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people thought they'd see me pretty soon, but I just realized, hey, if I'm out here, I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to do as good a job as I can. I'm going to serve people. That was really my main intention. But really what it gave back to me is just the discipline of learning. I don't know if I would have figured that out without, spending those 2 years just reading.
Is this experience where you developed this? I've heard you talk about it a little bit before. This grit, determination, figure it out, like you said. You're out on your mission and you're there. You're just going to figure it out. Is that something that started back here when you were trying to determine how to?
I just knew that I may not be able to do it like other people. One of my good friends, Gordon May, I grew up with, and that guy just could consume everything and would just repeat it to you. And for me, it didn't flow that way. Now I had, I think, again, at work, I think one of the talents that I have is, aggregating the right people, having a vision, focusing on culture. I mean, there's things that I think that I do have some real talent at, but, finance, all that kind of stuff, that's not my skill. I mean, I can sit there and read a P&L, but if you told me, hey, walk me through all of this, I'd be like, no, that's what my accountant does. That's what my CFO does. And I think that's a really critical part sometimes. And then, you talked about maybe talking about books and different things. But it's really focusing on your strengths and doing the things that you're good at, and then letting other people, getting out of their way and not trying to, roll over other people. And I think it's the book Good to Great that talks about Chrysler and all that kind of stuff. And when a certain leader left, he took everything with him because he did everything, and he was the smart guy. And
he didn't let everybody else
he didn't
do
educate
their job
or teach anybody, and he checks out, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden they dip
down.
And so I think if you can find really good people and then put them around a table and then have them have a common goal and work towards it, you got 10 people that are pulling together instead of one or two that think they're really smart. Now there's people out there that are really smart, that are very capable, but I'm not one of them.
Well, all evidence to the contrary. We know that's not true. But I will say this. Sometimes the superstars aren't the best teachers.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have to necessarily go through the struggle of figuring it out. Now, I'm not saying that they didn't struggle or work hard or have determination and all of those things. But sometimes it could be really hard for someone like a Kobe Bryant to say, well, you just do, this is how I do. You just do this.
Yeah.
And for a guy like you and I to say, well, I can't do that.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. And they can't teach it.
Yeah.
But the path that you went through was much more based on, I have to figure this out. And so I don't know. It feels like maybe you have a deeper understanding of the process, and now you can relate to other people who may be struggling with something or may have a hard time figuring something out because you've been there. You've gone through that.
Yeah. And I also just, I remember somebody said to me, he said, you have a feeling about you that you don't think you're enough. And at first I took that and I was like, wow, that's sad and that's depressing. But as I thought more about it, I thought that is my driver. Because if you think you're enough, then you stop trying and you stop pushing yourself. And that's why I feel in the role that I'm in, I have so much more to learn. And I'm so educated every single day. I sit with people. I'm like, wow, I mean, that's fascinating, or that's a great idea. And it's because I think this innate feeling that I'm not enough and that I have to keep pushing. And I'm grateful, after I thought about it for a couple of months, I was like, actually, I'm really grateful that I may have that feeling because it'll always push me to try to be better or learn or grow. And I think that also, is one of the things that I truly want to get the highest potential out of people that I work with.
Yeah.
And I'm very transparent. I'm a direct communicator. I get in trouble all the time because I say exactly what the person I think needs to hear. Now I could probably work on that, but I'm like, why waste time? If this is something you need to hear and it's something I need to say, or it's something I need to hear, I want you to say to me, as quickly as you can, what is it that you want to teach me? Or because I remember growing up as a kid learning sports, and if there was something new, I was fascinated and I was fixated, and I had no ego when it came to learning. Like skateboarding was one of the things I loved as a kid, skateboarding on half pipes. And I would ask, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I was always just asking questions because in the back of my head, I said, I'll be better than you at some point, because I'm gonna learn everything and then I'm gonna push myself to be better at everything that I can do. And that's how I kind of always looked at things, because I was like, I want to compete. And I was never really driven by winning or dominating things or people. I just wanted to learn, and I wanted to learn a skill, and I wanted to be good at it and I really wanted to master things.
Yeah.
And so that was a real driver for me as a kid, like in football or any of the sports I played. I was like, I mean, Walter Payton was my guy. And I was just like, to this day, I would watch him and watch him and watch him and how he would put the ball forward. And I was this little 8-year-old kid putting the ball forward because Walter Payton did. And I'm not that, I didn't get that gene of watching sports. I don't watch sports. I don't really follow players. But for me, somebody like that who had a skill that was just next level, it was something I thought I could learn.
Well, the interesting thing about a Walter Payton or a Kobe Bryant or a Michael Jordan or a Tiger Woods is success never diminished their quest to be more successful.
Yeah.
And that's what you're describing in you. Like you've had a really nice career and you're in a really great spot in your current role with RSL, but you're not stopping. Like you're going to keep learning and you're going to keep improving and you're going to keep getting better. And I think that's the difference between really good and the really great. I was telling you, we had Dan Clark, and Dan Clark is fantastic.
Yeah,
like,
he's amazing.
He tells stories that are just unbelievable. One story he talked about was he had a chance to meet with Muhammad Ali. And long story short, Muhammad Ali lost the championship at one point to Leon Spinks. And Dan Clark asked him, how did you lose that championship? And Muhammad Ali said, I forgot that when I stepped in the ring, I wasn't the champion anymore. I had to fight for it.
Yeah.
Just like anybody else.
Did. Yeah.
And I think that's really telling and meaningful is in your career and in careers in general, that's not a bad mindset. It's like when you step in the arena every day, you're not the champion anymore. You have to go earn it.
Yeah. No, it's when people, like when you say things or describe or talk about my career where I'm at, I honestly look behind me because I'm like, who are you talking about? Because I don't recognize that. I feel like I still, I've always joked about imposter syndrome where somebody's going to say, dude, we figured out you have no idea what you're doing. And I do think it's that, trying to be enough that drives me, or that I am an imposter and that I just have to keep pushing and learning to get better. Because if I don't, somebody's going to say, yeah, you're the guy in the room. I mean, I go to these conferences. Like I was in New York last week with the HBSC, the Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment Group. And here is a group of presidents from the 76ers, the New Jersey Devils, the Washington Commanders, Joe Gibbs Racing Team that David Blitzer just bought, Crystal Palace. And we're at this lake in upper New York and here's the people who came to spoke were Joe Gibbs, Dr. J, and this hockey player I should know that's won multiple Stanley Cups, but I don't know his name.
It wasn't Wayne Gretzky, was it?
No, it wasn't Wayne. I would cross the street for Wayne. But I'm sitting here just going, what am I doing here? I hope they don't ask me a question because I don't know what I'm going to say. And it was really humbling to be in the presence of these just amazing people and to hear stories, and to hear Dr. J, tell stories about, being in Philly. And, for me, like I said, it's humbling to be, working with those type of people because these guys are next level people. And then David Blitzer shows up and his partner, and it like I said, it was powerful.
Well,
very humbling.
You do belong in the room. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that if Dr. J went on a podcast, he'd be saying, man, I was sitting next to this guy, John Kimball.
I did have to shake his hand.
How big was his hand?
That was the only reason why. It wasn't for any other reason that I just wanted to see. And I walked right up to him and I'll tell you, he told an amazing story because they were asking questions. There was about 30 of us there. And they asked Dr. J about an experience, and he told this story. I can't even remember which team he was playing for at the time, but they had a coach that they were in the championship, and they were down, I think, 3-1, and facing an elimination and having to go away to play the opposing team at their home. And the coach, for whatever Miyagi reason, came in and said, I can't teach you guys anything else. This is on you. You guys need to figure this out, and walked out. And he, again, I'm not a sports. It's funny I say this. I've been in sports my whole career.
I know you keep saying that, but you are a sports guy.
He said this player that was on his team said, you guys, this is completely on us. There's nobody else behind us. Nobody. We have to win these games to win the championship, and it's only on us. And they traveled to the away game, and they went into the locker room, and they got to their lockers, and their lockers were full of letters from the front office that said, we're with you, we're behind you, and had personal letters from all these. And he starts crying. Dr. J is getting emotional telling this story, and he's like, we won that game for our club, for everybody in the club. And it was funny because the guy that did the presentation, he said, if you would have told me of all the people that would have cried this weekend, that it would be Dr. J. But it was such a powerful story for me, because I tend to believe sometimes that the players don't really notice what we do, and they don't even really care what we do in the front office. And it was so powerful to hear him say what a difference it made, to know that everybody was behind them, and what a difference, that the front office makes for the players and their support, and just knowing that, we're here for them regardless. I mean, our livelihoods depend on it.
Yeah. So
it was really, anyways, it was a cool,
that's amazing
cool story.
Yeah. That's an amazing story. So how big was his hand?
Massive. It like literally, I was just like going like that. It was, yeah.
Dan Patrick describes it. He went into a locker room after a playoff game. Dr. J was in there, had his knees, wasn't icing his knees. And he said he had his hands resting on his knees, icing it, and his fingers were touching his shins. That's how he describes the size of his hand. And if you ever watch highlights of Dr. J, it was like he was holding a golf ball.
Yeah, exactly.
The way he managed the basketball.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
No, he is a phenomenal. It was really just, that was kind of a wow moment for me.
That is. Sure. Okay, so all of this is so great.
Sorry, I'm all over the place.
No, this is exactly how we want this to go.
We got to grade school, I think.
I want to ask you about this, because even though you're not a sports guy, you've been in sports your whole career in some capacity, and now you're running a team. And if you've ever been involved in athletics, and I believe this in business as well, culture wins.
Yeah.
Culture wins. And you've taken this RSL team on this trajectory of winning. And I believe, you tell me if I'm wrong, I believe that it starts with the culture that you implemented inside the walls, that now feeds out to the team and to the players. So I just want to know, let's make this connection between all that you've learned and talked about to this point, and how you teach that to a team, because that's not an easy task.
Yeah, and I can't and won't take credit for it. And there's an interesting story behind it. And again, it goes back to somebody that was part of our team early when we had won the championship. Tony Beltran was still a part of the club when I got back. And Tony is an incredibly intelligent person, highly skilled, very well read, very educated, and he was part of that culture with Jason Kreis. And when I came back, again, books pop into my head. Crucial Conversations. I remember there was a woman in the book that came into a position, and she said, "I'm just going to meet with everybody." So I thought, I'm just going to meet with everybody. So I literally just started meeting with everybody. And I guess the moral of the story was that the culture was lost or had been crippled And a big part of that was COVID. There was just a lot going on. There was, the ownership issue, which I'm happy to discuss because, we can talk about that. But the reality was that there was a culture issue at the club, and I felt the quickest way for me to really understand it was to just individually look into everybody's face and say, "Tell me what's going on." And I gave literally everybody that opportunity, and I had the chance to meet with Tony, and Tony, was a little guarded at first, but we had a relationship from before. And finally, he came to me and he produced this Jerry Maguire manifesto. And it was a document that he had written that literally, I think, was 72 pages long about Real Salt Lake and about the culture and about what he believed the team and the organization should be about. And so from that, I read through the whole thing, and then I put together a small group of people, and I said, we're going to use this because this speaks to the culture that we had in the past. And I think it captures what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And so we broke it down to, I think, about an 8-page document, and the RSL Way is what came out of that 8-page document, which was kind of the mantra that I came back to the organization and I said, thanks to Tony and courtesy of Tony, we have what I truly believe is the backbone of what this club could be and should be and has been in the past. And with the belief and the knowledge that we could achieve it again because it had been done. I think one time, sometimes it's not believable because you're just like, there's just no way.
Yeah.
How do you accomplish that? But we'd done it before. But more importantly, the culture that we had before was just one of like I said, with the rugby analysis, it's just, that kind of drop, sink, and push where everybody does it together. And if you're aligned and everybody stops whining about this, that, and the other, and we get back to work, we can do amazing things. And so the RSL Way was what was kind of the impetus to get things going. And then there's been a lot of ups and downs. I mean, we've had players that we needed to get rid of. We've had employees that needed to move on. And it's really being sensitive enough to, back to good to great. If you're not on the bus and you're not in the right seat, and we try to get you in the right seat and you still don't fit on the bus, then you got to get off the bus. And we went systematically through kind of that exercise of trying to get people that just flat out couldn't let things go or couldn't move forward or didn't believe in what we were doing. And I truly believe, it's been that due diligence of work. And then with the team this last year, really, the ownership was really wise to come in and tell Pablo, either you leave or all your assistants leave, you pick. And Pablo, honestly thought long and hard about that because he is just an amazing human being. And he came back and said, I want to learn from this experience. I think we can do great things with this club. It breaks my heart to let these guys go, but I'll follow your lead. And he brought in all new assistant coaches and then created process. And that's where I truly believe some of the fundamentals are the process. It's the culture to begin with, but then we're now at a phase where I think accountability is our next step. Because I think the culture is healthy enough, and now we really need to hold everybody accountable. And that means the process of one-on-ones, department meetings. I mean, I was going to departments and saying, tell me about your department meeting. And they're like, oh, what department meeting? And I was like, when I came here 3 years ago, I sat down and we built out the process, and the process is department meetings weekly. It's one-on-ones bi-weekly. It's accountability. It's people knowing exactly why they're here, what they're doing. And if you don't follow up on that, then things go sideways. The first year, we sold out every single game. We didn't have ownership. We made it to the playoffs. I mean, we had an amazing year. And it was really because I think everybody just kind of came together and said, we're going to do this. The next year, I think we kind of lost some accountability, and I think we lost some process, and I think we kind of expected things to just keep going. And the reality is, if you don't keep putting in the work, it's not going to go the way you want it to go.
Yeah.
And so this past year, we've really leaned back into process, accountability. That's where we're headed now, is really on the business side, especially, holding people accountable. And I think it kind of speaks back to, maybe some of the things I learned in rugby, that there's consequences. If you are not going to hit your goals, you're going to get warned. We're going to work with you. We're going to do the best we can. But ultimately, if you can't do it, then you've got to move on. It might be better for you. It's going to be better for the club. But we just got to hold people accountable.
Well, I think that I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that experience of your star player falling outside of what was maybe the Gelwick's way, and how I think what Coach Gelwick's may have seen is we're building a culture of winning with Highland Rugby. We're building a culture of winning, and everybody has to be on board.
Yeah.
And if one person is not on board, how does that diminish and damage the culture? I can't take that risk.
Yeah.
You can't take that risk. So it's as true for a rugby team as it is for someone like you now running a business.
Yeah.
And you probably want to be helpful and to teach and to try and give opportunity. But at some point, you find yourself probably making, well, maybe it's not a hard decision, but you find yourself making a decision.
Yeah.
Is our culture more valuable than this individual who is not aligned with our culture?
Yeah. No, and you know this from playing sports. If there's a weak link and you create a culture of accountability, the coach doesn't even have to say anything anymore. I mean, on Highland Rugby, if somebody was not stepping up or was not part of what we were trying to do, the players would call them out and say, what are you doing? Either you get in line and on board, because we can't do it without, and this from playing sports, that if there's a weak link or somebody not putting in the effort, that it affects the whole team. And it's the same thing in business. It's that, and people go through a lot of things. I mean, I've been through amazing challenges in my life that you can either use to inspire you or you can use to cripple you. And so I think back to your point with Popovich of just focusing on the individual, and that's where the one-on-ones come in. If I'm not meeting with you one-on-one to see if you're going through something in your life, if you just lost your mom or if something just happened, of course performance may go down. And if you have that empathy and compassion and understanding, then you can work with somebody. But if you're not meeting with them and talking to them, you don't know what's going on, and then their performance goes down, and then you don't know how to hold them accountable, and then it just creates this process of somebody not achieving or doing what they're supposed to do. But if you know what's going on, and somebody has a dip, and then they get inspired and come back, and they're strong at what, it's just having that connection, and just having the KPIs and the accountability that's there so that people know, but then having management lean in and just, how are you doing? How can I help? What's going on? And just, having that understanding. And then if somebody just doesn't fit and isn't on the bus, then having the knowledge and the history of working with the person that it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
And then you move on.
Yeah. There's two things that I'd like to talk about coming out of that. One is this accountability piece, and the other piece is the connection. I think they're both significantly important in what you were just talking about. On the connection piece, I know you've been in the same situation. You've been an employee and you've been a leader in an organization. And I will just tell you, my experience in both of those positions is, if my leader is not visiting with me regularly, and I'm not talking about like, did you get your report done? Did you do this assignment? I'm talking about, if my leader is not connecting with me on a regular basis, my motivation is diminished.
Sure.
As an employee.
Yeah.
And I also know that as a leader, if you're not connecting with your people regularly on a deeper level, then their performance is diminished. So I think that's extremely important. I love that you have instituted that. And that's been meaningful, obviously, in the organization.
Oh, it keeps proving itself. I met with somebody the other day and they said, hey, we want to get rid of this person. And I said, how have the one-on-ones been going? Have you followed a protocol? Has this led you to a place where you don't think they're performing? And they're like, well, kind of been skipping on the one-on-ones. I just don't think they fit. And I said, well, guess what? You can't do that because maybe they're going through something. And maybe if you engaged and inspired them or asked them, how you could help them, they might end up being your best employee.
Yeah.
But if you don't engage and you don't do the process and follow the protocol, you can't come to an employee. I said, the worst thing you can do to an employee is surprise them with getting fired. If they don't know they're going to get fired,
that's great.
I mean, an employee should know. They should be at a point where they're like, yeah, you told me 2 months ago, we worked for a month. You checked back in with me again on multiple one-on-ones every other week. The process and the progress just isn't there. You even sat and called people with me. They come to the conclusion, you know what, you're right. I just don't want to be here. This isn't working for me. And you're like, great. And now it's time to move on.
Yeah.
But if you don't do that, then people are like, what? What did I do?
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, that one time. And you're like, and they get upset, and then they leave and they badmouth the company, and it just never goes well.
Yeah.
But I think so many managers want to be liked as opposed to respected. They want to be friends with people.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get paid. I tell people we don't get paid to be friends. We're here to work. Now, friends can be an amazing byproduct, but you have to hold people accountable. You have to be able to fire people. If you're not a leader, you won't be able to fire people because you got to say, hey, how's the work going? Because if we're all friends and nobody's getting the work done, then you're going to get fired.
And that's not a culture. That's not a winning
people
culture.
Confuse that with culture.
No.
Oh, we're all friends.
Right.
We all hang out together. It's so much fun. Yeah. Well, where's the accountability? Yeah. What's the success of the company? Is there those, opportunities and KPIs? Are you hitting your numbers? And I'll tell you, when you're doing that with a team, there's just nothing better than that, because then you can be friends. You actually can, get along, hang out, but there's nothing better than having somebody in a team that you're looking at that's highly successful because you're all holding each other accountable.
Well, and that's the second part, is this accountability that you mentioned. When you can create a culture where people take ownership of the success of the team, and now you, as the manager, are not calling people out, but the team members are calling people out, that's when I believe you're on the right track. When Phil Jackson says at halftime, hey, we're not rebounding, we're not passing, we're not, and he walks out of the room, and then Michael Jordan stands up and says, there's a different message. So how do you had that with Highland Rugby, you've had that throughout your career. How do you create that? How do you create that ownership within the team to take that initiative?
One of the things, and I've been hit in the head too many times, so I don't remember where or when or how I read it, but somebody said you don't hire people and then motivate them, you hire motivated people. And if there's regrets that I have, there's people either in the company or that I've worked with in the past that are just great people, but they're just not motivated. And for a number of reasons. There's a number of reasons why, for whatever reason, they're just not there to get it done. They're complacent. They love being part of the club, but there's not a winning, driving momentum that they're carrying, and that, you know, if they were left on their own, they'd just be like, well, yeah, whatever. So I think, you know, back to sports and winning and things like that, when you're part of something that wins, it's just, it's phenomenal, and it's addictive.
Yeah.
And you want more of it. And when you have motivated people that have a common goal to be successful, I mean, to be a part of that high school team was just, it was unbelievable. And I think it literally set me in a trajectory of wanting to be part of something that created success, and knowing that you don't get there without the hard work. You don't get there without the process. You don't get there without running 2 miles on your honor. And that's what Larry would say, on your honor, 3 miles this week. And we'd all say, yes, coach. And then everybody'd go do it. And the ones that didn't, you know, for the most part, weren't starting, weren't playing, and we all knew that they didn't put in the effort.
Absolutely.
And we didn't want them on the field with us.
Yeah.
And to your point, they get called out by the members. And that's when I think a team in business or sports is highly successful, because everybody's holding everybody accountable. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to be successful. But then there's also an understanding and a compassion if something goes wrong, if somebody rolls their ankle, if somebody does, or if somebody has a critical issue in their life, you have the compassion to say, I know this is affecting you, and we got you, and we'll pick up the rest of the work for you until you get back to where you need to be. Because then when they're back and they see that, you know, compassion and effort by the team, you know, they're willing to do it when somebody else checks out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great lesson. There's so many great lessons that you've described here today. I have a few more questions for you.
Okay.
And I know I don't want your boss calling again.
No, we're good.
In the middle of our.
Yeah. I think we're good.
I do have a few random questions though.
Shoot.
Before we wrap this whole thing up.
Okay.
I got to see you in Miami.
That's right.
At an RSL game in Miami. And you know, the craziest thing about that is when I was walking into the stadium, behind the goal, Messi had the ball and he was doing his Messi magic.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, Messi's good. He's a good. And then when I saw him live, I thought, oh yeah, now I get it.
Yeah.
In fact, we got to watch when he dribbled over one of our RSL players.
Brody.
down on the turf. Well, I don't want to talk to you about Messi. I just really wanted to tell that I had that experience with Messi.
Yeah.
But did you happen to get to be with any of the ownership of that Inter Miami team during that event?
I did cross paths, and that was one of the things that really ultimately proved to myself that I don't really care about professional athletes, because I had the opportunity to walk up to Messi and introduce myself. And I didn't. And it wasn't because I didn't want to, or I was scared, or I was just like, well, there he is. And that's cool. And again, it's got to be a gene. It's got to be something that just was missed on me, because he was there in the hallway. He was there on the field. I could easily walk up and say, hey, I'm the president of Real Salt Lake. Just want to introduce myself. That would be fully acceptable, and he wouldn't think that was weird.
Yeah.
I was just like, well, there's Messi. And
John, he's a top 10 player of all time.
I know, but that's my point. It's like, if you don't like fish, you don't like fish. And it's not that I don't like Messi. It's just like, I'm not that guy. I'm not the guy that's going to walk up and I will say it was really cool to see him play. And you were there. I mean, we sat together for a little while, and we had a suite. And the thing that was really cool for everybody who cared was our suite was right next to the corner. And he literally you could have touched him from those field suites.
Yeah.
And everybody that was in our suite was like out of their minds. And I was sitting up in the stands with you guys, because I was the view down there was horrible because you're on the field level. But if you're dorking out about Messi, it was definitely the place to be, because he was in that corner, 6 times that game?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, I had that chance. I probably should have took it. That was maybe stupid, but
Yeah.
But yeah, he is a phenom. He is, unbelievable.
Unreal.
Mm-hmm.
Were the Beckhams at that game?
Actually, he was there. And that was the other thing that you know what? Let me think about that. I'm pretty sure I walked past him as well. And he is a guy, I would never do this, but I would like to go up and tell him that story and just say how impressed I was.
Yeah.
And that was significant to me. I was just like, wow, that really shows a lot of character, especially for, the most beautiful man on the planet. But I was just like,
yeah,
he's also got character, like,
well, that's what you learned in the documentary, is that there's real substance.
Oh, for him to go through what he went through, to be literally hated by his country.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about, seriously. I mean, some of the people these days just could not talk about emotional stress, to walk down the street and be hated by everybody in your country. And he just shouldered that. And you can only imagine the dark moments that he dealt with. And then, for him to just keep the process, keep working, keep his head down, and then becomes, the national hero. That wouldn't have happened without his hard work and determination to get through what ended up being a powerful, maybe learning experience for him. And that's what I really see challenges is just powerful learning experiences.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great way to put it. And people talk about challenges and overcoming obstacles, and obstacle is the way. But that's it. It's an obstacle, a challenge is a powerful learning experience. But you have to have the mindset.
No,
that's
true.
Because a challenge can also, and we've seen that as well, just fold people over.
Yeah, it can be debilitating.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on at the club, and I just had this conversation today with an employee, and, you have to, the Navy SEALs talk about embracing the suck.
Uh-huh.
And so when the challenge comes, you can't pretend it's not a challenge. You can't pretend maybe it's not fair or that it sucks. You got to acknowledge it and go, that really sucks. And I didn't do anything to deserve that. And I'm really pissed and I want to go kick something. And then you got to go through the process of, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? Because if you stay in embracing the suck, which a lot of people do their whole lives, there's people who embrace the suck.
Absolutely.
And use it as the reason why.
The excuse.
Yeah, it's the excuse. I'm a victim. I'm this, I'm that. Or you can just take that and just say, wow, I'm going to overcome this. And this is going to be a powerful learning experience for me. And I think it's guys like Beckham and others that you see that just rise above stuff that is, the story of sport is what fascinates me. It's not the sport itself or the athlete itself, but when there's an individual that does something phenomenal, like Messi is phenomenal. And I should have introduced myself, but you look at a guy of his stature, you watch him in a game, he walks 80% of the time.
Yeah,
but the 20% that he makes himself available is in a channel that you don't expect him, and then he scores 4 goals on you.
Yeah.
He's the most efficient athlete on the planet. And,
yes.
And the thing I love most about watching him and his highlights is he would get the crap kicked out of him and he would roll and just keep going.
Yeah.
He would not play. That's one of the things I hate about soccer. It is the
downside with soccer.
It ruins the game.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I don't know why these players think it's effective,
especially with all the cameras on everybody all the time.
I can't stand purists. They're like, it's just part of the game. It's, no, it's not. In rugby, if you did that, your own player would slap you across the face. Yeah. Because they're just like, what are you doing?
Drag you off the field. Yeah, get out of here.
Your own players would drag you off the field.
Right.
But, anyways, that's.
Yeah, it's the one downside. Yeah. Okay, with all of that in mind that we just talked about, which comic book superhero would you align with the most?
That is a good one. I'd say Deadpool, but.
Overcoming challenges. Yeah. That's
no,
good. Just
I mean,
keep
it's funny.
learning.
That's
keep getting
that's a
better.
really good question.
Deadpool.
I don't know.
I mean,
I would say Deadpool if I really thought about it, and not for, you know, some of the obvious reasons, but because, you know, of the story,
yeah.
you know, and
It's-
I love the humor. I
it's-
mean,
yeah.
the humor is amazing,
Yeah.
and you know, it's irreverent and all those things. And I laugh at stuff like that.
I'm a huge Deadpool guy
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah.
Well,
So
you know-
if you're talking about, do you identify with the story? I would say I identify with that story. I love Spider-Man and Superman and Batman, but I don't know how I identify with any of their
Yeah.
stories.
getting bitten by a radioactive
Right.
spider.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me ask you this as a follow-up. Since you mentioned Deadpool, if Ryan Reynolds gave you a call and said, "Hey, John, I've been following your career and what you're doing with RSL. I have a little team over here,
Yeah.
and we'd like a shot of culture
Mm-hmm.
brought over. I'd like to hire you as my new president at Wrexham."
Yeah.
What's your answer?
Hell yeah. I think I would do that. I'm a big fan of him. I would walk across the street for Ryan Reynolds, but he is, and I watched that show, and I mean, just his personality and his humor, and just seems like a really good human being. But I think I'm at a place in my life where my kids are solid, they're amazing. And man, an experience like that for 3-4 years would just be, you know, I'm about experiences. My whole life's been about experiences. And, you know, I would think that would be pretty cool.
Well, I think there's a lot of similarity too, because like Ryan Reynolds is not very attractive. He's not very
exactly.
talented. He probably is not athletic at all.
Not athletic. No physical.
No physical attributes. And he's just had to overcome.
Yeah, that's right.
Just like you.
That's true. That's
You're
true.
like
very similar.
You're like Salt Lake's own Ryan Reynolds.
I'm like Salt Lake's own Deadpool with no superhuman abilities.
That's who you are. Man, this has been so fascinating. The lessons, the thoughts on culture and building that and instituting that in teams. What is the biggest challenge you face I know we've talked about culture kind of inside the walls. What is the biggest challenge you face in dealing with all of the personalities on the field, all of the players, and they're from all over the place?
Yeah.
How do you manage all of that? How do you incorporate the culture on that crew as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's again the lucky. I mean, I don't really have any accountability to the team. I am primarily been the business side, but I'm definitely involved in that. And that's a perfect example of hiring people that are really skilled. I mean, Kurt Schmidt is phenomenal. He's an amazing human being. He's super smart. And then the process of bringing Jason Kreis back and just how he fits and how he connects. We've just got some really talented people. Tony Beltran is part of that team. And we have a philosophy, and what our strategy is to build young players and bring them into the first team and then potentially be able to sell them to other teams.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had games where, you know, we're by far the youngest team that's had players on the field at one time. At one point we had a game where we had 3 17-year-olds starting first team, playing on the field, or people under 20, I think is what it was. Diego Luna is a perfect example of a guy that the coach just believed in. And you take Kurt Schmidt, Jason Kreis, Tony Beltran, then you throw in Pablo and his team. I mean, they're some of the, you know, most talented people in the league. And, you know, and then you put in where I feel I have contributed, if I've contributed at all, is the process and saying, you got to do this process. If we don't do the process, if you guys aren't holding department meetings, if you aren't holding one-on-ones, if you aren't meeting with team administrators and the medical team and doing the things to hear, what players are saying and what we need to do to have the process, then we won't be successful. And I think it's a mixture of all of those talented people and then the process that you're now seeing being displayed on the field. And all the hard work has gone into it. And they really do hold themselves accountable. And when you do that with a group of good people, the end result is what you see is happening on the field.
But that just encapsulates everything we talked about. You talked about accountability, the process. Now, people might look at the inside of the house and the outside of the house with a soccer club or a professional organization, sports organization. But what you're describing is, look, the process is the process.
It's the same.
It applies in all areas.
I think the biggest learning curve I had in the last 3 years was, I was very respectful of the team side and where I can't contribute, I know sports. I've competed. I've played on a lot of good teams. I've played a lot of sports. I still play sports. I love to compete. I love sports. What I don't do is follow teams and individuals and things like that. But, I looked at the team side and I said, that's nothing I know. I'm gonna respectfully observe. I'm gonna stay out of it. I'm gonna let them do their thing. They're experts. They clearly know something that I don't know. It's different. Don't get in. And I sat in all the meetings and sat in all of the discussions of who and what we were doing and was a part of everything, but really more so as an observer than anybody that contributed anything. And what I learned is that the process is exactly the same. And what we were missing from a year to another year was process and was accountability. And ironically, Pablo in a podcast was talking to actually it was on our ownership call. And there's a gentleman named Scott McLaughlin who represents David Blitzer's soccer portfolio. So there's 4 or 5 teams in Europe, including Crystal Palace, that's part of that group. And Scott oversees all of us, and he's kind of the lead soccer person of GFH, which is Global Football Holdings. And he asked Pablo, he said, Pablo, what do you think's been the main thing that's really changed that you're seeing the success? And he said, it's this process. He said, as a matter of fact, now I have a meeting every single week where everyone is around the table. The GM is there, Jason Kreis is there, soccer ops is there, the team administrator's there, marketing's there, legal's there, ticketing's there, sponsorship's there. And he said, we all sit down and we talk about what it is that we're doing as a club. And he said, that has been very meaningful to me. And so to hear the head coach identify part of the process that needed to, help us come together. Now, it's obviously not the only thing, but it's made an impact. And I think that was the aha for me, where I was like, it's exactly the same. Yeah. It's process, it's principles, it's accountability, it's department meetings, it's one-on-ones, it's connection, it's compassion, it's all those things. And if you don't do it and you don't do the work every single day, you'll start to lose something.
Yeah.
So,
well, and then the last part of that you mentioned is having the right people on the bus, and for the sake of culture, moving people along who aren't willing to be on the bus.
Or they just don't fit.
Or they just don't fit.
I've had a number of people go on and I, unfortunately have been involved with letting a lot of people go, but I've always tried to follow a process. And I've had a number of people come back and say, thank you so much. I'm actually in a job that I love. And I probably would have just kept trying to do something that I'm just not good at if you didn't say, hey, let's go through this process and let's see if you really want to be here.
Yeah.
And they come back and go, that was a very pivotal point for me to make a change. And people have gone on to be way more successful than me. And I'm just like, good for you. That's awesome.
You're like it's the Dick Vermeil philosophy. They asked him why he was so successful as a coach. And he just said, I just hire people better than me.
Yeah, no, I truly believe that. I have, again, so many talented people, and it's just getting everybody to believe that I have a voice and I can have an idea, and just trying to best idea wins.
Well, it's fascinating. It's super meaningful. And we're talking about a professional athletics team, but this applies in the corporate world just as effectively. I think that's why what you're talking about is so meaningful. So we really appreciate that. We appreciate your time and all of the insight. It is a fascinating story, and it's a great story. And I'm glad that I learned things today that I just never knew. And I'm glad that you gave us all of this time. I'm super grateful for that.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you guys having me.
I just have one last question before I
Here
let you
it comes.
go. Yeah. Does Diego Luna just wear super baggy shorts, or is that just like his body type? Because he's like running around out there, and I'm not sure. I think he's going to get like caught up in his shorts. There's just so much material around.
I don't know if it's a new style. It's I think these kids go back and forth from
he's like the Michigan
short
Fab
shorts
Five.
to big shorts, but he is such a factor. He'll be playing for our Olympic team. And to see that kid from where he was just a year ago or 2 years ago, and quite honestly, to see him work with Pablo and the connection and what Pablo's gotten out of him, and credit to my boss, Scott Crace. Scott Crace was kind of the guy that found Diego and said, this is a guy that is relevant and you just got to give him a chance. And it's just amazing to see him as successfully. He's going to have a phenomenal career. So.
Yeah. Well, I know that a lot of people love Diego Luna.
Yeah.
He's fantastic.
Yeah.
There he is, John Kimball.
Thank you.
President of RSL. What a great, meaningful podcast. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Know Your Ship podcast presented by eHub. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.